The late afternoon sun spilled gold across the vast Montana plains, the kind of glow that made even the loneliest hearts pause and breathe. For years, Ethan Walker had worked this land alone, just him, the cattle, and the wide-open silence that whispered with ghosts of the past. A widower at 36, he buried not only his wife but a part of himself with her. His little daughter, Emma, barely 8, was the only light that kept him tethered to this world. He wasn't the kind of man to dream of second chances, but the ad for mail-order brides in a frontier newspaper had caught his attention one quiet night when loneliness pressed too hard against his chest. A lady of gentle spirit seeking an honest home. Willing to embrace family, even from a chair. That last line had lingered in his mind longer than he'd care to admit. Most men would have skipped over it, but something about her words, simple, brave, and real, had reached deeper than he expected. He'd sent a letter, not thinking she'd reply. But she did. Her name was Clara Bennett. For weeks, their letters traveled across miles of dust and time. She wrote of quiet mornings by the sea back east, of learning to sew after an accident took her ability to walk, and of dreaming of a life where her worth wasn't measured by what her legs could do. Ethan replied with tales of ranch life, of the work, the long days, and the stars that seemed close enough to touch. Somewhere between those letters, two hearts began to find a rhythm, a fragile hope neither dared to name love yet. The day finally came. The stagecoach rolled into Dusty Ridge with a cloud of dirt and the sound of wheels grinding against the dry earth. Ethan stood there, his hat in his hand, heart thundering in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. Beside him, little Emma clung to his sleeve, eyes wide with curiosity. The driver stepped down first, then turned to help a woman in a light blue dress edged with lace. Her gloved hands trembled slightly as she reached for the handles of the wheelchair being lowered behind her. The town went quiet. A few folks looked on, whispering behind gloved hands. But Ethan didn't care. When Clara finally looked up, her eyes found his, and something inside him stilled, like the world itself had drawn in a breath. She was beautiful, not in the way the magazines sold it, but in the kind that humbles a man. Her chestnut hair fell loose in curls around her shoulders, her face soft yet strong, her smile tentative but true. She seemed surprised that he'd come. Maybe she expected regret in his eyes. Instead, Ethan crouched down to meet her gaze level. "You made it," he said quietly, his voice deep and warm. "Welcome home, Miss Bennett." Clara blinked, unsure whether to smile or cry. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, each one ending with disappointment or pity. She never thought a man like Ethan Walker would look at her as if she belonged under that big Montana sky just as much as he did. "I wasn't sure you'd still want to meet me," she admitted softly. Ethan's brow furrowed. "I didn't ask for legs, Clara. I asked for a wife. I asked for someone who'd be kind to my girl, who'd stand beside me when the storms roll in. Seems to me, you already fit that just fine." That was the first time she truly smiled, a small one at first, but it reached her eyes like sunlight spilling over dawn. The days that followed weren't easy. The ranch was no place for someone who couldn't walk, or so the neighbors said. Clara heard their whispers. She saw the pity in the eyes of women who came by with fresh pies and curious questions. But she also saw Ethan, every morning, patient, steady, refusing to let her feel like less than whole. He built a ramp outside the porch himself, staying up late under lantern light. When she protested, saying he had enough to do, he simply grinned. "You said in your letter you like watching sunsets. Can't have you missing them just because this old porch wasn't ready for you." Emma adored her. The little girl would bring her wildflowers every morning, chattering about ponies and prairie dogs, asking Clara to tell her stories about the sea. Slowly, the house that had once been too quiet began to echo again, with laughter, with the soft sound of wheels against wood floors, with the hum of a piano Clara played in the evenings. She wasn't just a bride, she became the soul the ranch didn't know it was missing. But beneath it all, Clara still carried a quiet fear. What if Ethan regretted this? What if pity had dressed itself up as kindness? One night, after Emma had gone to bed and the moon hung silver over the plains, Clara found Ethan on the porch, staring out into the distance. She wheeled beside him, her heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. "You never asked how it happened," she said quietly. Ethan turned, meeting her eyes. "Didn't figure it mattered. You're here. That's what counts." She looked away, voice trembling. "I used to ride horses. fast ones. I was wild and free until one day a storm came sudden. The horse slipped, and so did I. Since then, every man I met only saw the chair. Not me. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at her for a long moment before stepping closer, his rough hands resting gently on hers. Then every man you met before was a fool. Her breath caught. And you, she whispered. He smiled faintly, taught her to shoot, to rope, to live without apology. And in return, she taught him to feel again, to laugh, to remember that love could be gentle, not just a scar to carry. Months later, when the first snow dusted the valley, Ethan gathered the whole town at the small chapel on the ridge. Clara thought it was a simple Sunday gathering, but when she wheeled inside, the truth unfolded. White flowers lined the aisle, Emma held a bouquet almost too big for her hands, and Ethan stood at the altar in his best coat, eyes locked on her like she was the only person in the room. "You once said you didn't want pity," he said when she reached him. "So I figured I'd better not wait to tell you, this ain't pity, Clara. It's love. And I aim to marry you today." Her hands trembled as tears spilled freely. The preacher cleared his throat, smiling. "Well, then, I reckon we should start before this fella bursts from nerves." When Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, Clara whispered, "I never thought I'd have this again." He smiled softly. "That's the thing about life out here, it's rough, it's wild, but sometimes it gives you back what you thought was gone forever." The crowd cheered as they kissed, the cold air filled with warmth only love could bring. And as the bells rang, Clara looked at the men who had seen her not as broken, but as whole, and realized that this ranch, this family, this love, was exactly what she'd been searching for all along. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky in streaks of gold and rose. Emma danced around them, laughing, while Ethan pushed Clara's chair toward the porch. She looked up at him and said softly, "You really did shock me, you know." He chuckled. "How's that?" "I came here thinking I'd be a burden," she whispered.